Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely matter and are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. I had an experience in June of 2004 and never thought about it again until a few years ago when I came across my journal entry from the time. Once I read it, everything came flooding back and has become the foundation for my personal belief in Bigfoot, Dogman, and other cryptids. To help you understand why I feel so strongly about their existence, I need to explain why I was in the middle of the wilderness to begin with. I grew up in an affluent part of southern Orange County, California, and began abusing drugs pretty early. Too much time plus too much money equals bad habits. So, I was what you would consider a troubled teen, right after I turned 17 in April of 2004. I got sent to the wilderness rehabilitation program called Aspen Achievement Academy, based out of Loa, Utah, about 3 to 4 hours south of Salt Lake City. After I changed clothes and received gear, I was transported by van to this big open area off a long dirt road, and then someone walked me another half an hour or so to meet my group. I don't know many specifics about where we camped or where we hiked throughout the entirety of the program, as they never told us much after that. We didn't have contact with anyone other than our group leaders and a therapist that would come periodically. I was in this program in the middle of the wilderness, always at least 2.5 to 3 hours and many miles away from civilization for 52 days. We would hike from water source to water source, and we were resupplied every 8 days when the staff changed over. I was in the wilderness for a total of my 52-day program. I do know 2 locations we hiked, a place called Ledge Lake that was on the edge of a huge cliff probably 300 to 400 feet above the forest floor below looking south. And I also know we hiked and camped at a place called Miller Creek Cove. So, all I know was that we were somewhere in southern Utah wilderness, most of, if not the entire time. Oh, and also, we had to write 1-page journal entry every day before dinner, and it is this journal that I found recently that reminded me of this incident. On June 11th, 2004, day 35 of my program, we had a 10-mile hike planned to reach the next water source. We never hiked longer than 1 day without making it to a place we could fill our bottles. We only carried what we needed. We were literally in the middle of the wilderness and could not physically carry non-essential items, even if we wanted to. During this particular hike, one of the other kids named Robbie hurt his knee really bad traversing the side of this mountain, so we had to change course and basically bushwhack straight down the mountain from where we were to find a clearing where we could set up camp. Everyone divided Robbie's gear, plus 2 of the other guys, so they could carry him down. When the ground leveled out at the bottom, we came to a trail. Think less hiking trail and more of an animal trail. The trail came to a T, and where we came down was basically at the top of this T. We hung our food bags 25 to 30 yards from the right, and we made camp about 50 yards further down the trail at the bottom of the T path on both sides of the trail. The forest was very dense. You could never really see further than about 25 to 30 yards because of how many trees there were, but there was enough of a clearing along this path that all 12 of us could spread out on either side of the trail and make a shelter out of our tarp and cord. When we woke up the next morning, I wrote in my journal later that night on June 12th of 2004, there were these crazy big footprints going through the site, and hair was found high up in a tree about shoulder height. I remember specifically the footprints were at least the length of my elbow to the tip of my fingers. I was fully grown at 6 foot when I was 17, so looking at my arm now, it would have had to have been 18 inches long and maybe 6 inches wide. I don't remember it looking any different than the shape of a normal human foot, just friggin' gigantic. Knowing what I know now, I would have documented the crap out of it and measured every toe and ridge and everything. I remember the gate was large enough that I felt like I was halfway doing a split to reach each one, and we were all laughing about it. Another thing I remember was how hard-packed the trail was, and that none of us, including the staff, 200-plus pound dudes, could make an impression in the dirt even remotely close to as deep as these giant footprints were. Deep enough that the ground looked like it was soft when a footprint was made, and then it dried completely hard as a rock in the morning by the time we found them. But it hadn't rained at all that night before, and they weren't there when we got there the afternoon before. The footsteps were from the bottom of the T, and then made a right toward the hanging food bags. Another 15 feet or so past the food bags, one of our counselors reached up and grabbed a tuft of hair that was stuck at the branch on the left side. My journal entry says it was shoulder height, but I remember him physically reaching up to grab it. I can't explain this discrepancy other than I either wrote it wrong then or I'm remembering it wrong now. In hindsight, I wish I would have smelled the hair and kept some of it. Anything more than having 15 minutes of wow, that's weird, and then moving on and forgetting about it. I remember the hair was light, orangish brown, but with lots of gray in it, like in aging gingerbread. I remember it was much more coarse and wiry than anything I had ever seen before in my life. I wish I would have frickin' smelled it, just to have another sensory memory of this whole thing. That quote I put in the paragraph above is the only thing in the journal entry about it. I'm sure I heard of Bigfoot before this happened, but I wasn't into any sort of that stuff. Cryptozoology, conspiracies, etc. UFOs I've been into since a child, from watching X-Files in the early 90s until I was in my mid-20s, so it's reasonable to me that I only wrote that one sentence about how crazy it was and then left it at that. Another strange thing from that morning that may be unrelated, but it was so crazy, is that there was this large tree in the clearing where we set up camp. And while we were looking at the footprints, another kid noticed these super deep claw marks going up the trunk. At the time, we thought maybe a mountain lion or something similar was up the tree, stalking us overnight because we were in their territory or something. The claw marks were narrow, maybe half an inch wide, and at the deepest point, maybe an inch to a half, 2 inches deep. They were still fresh, with green from the aspen tree underneath. I like to think that whatever it was scrambled up the tree when the Sasquatch came walking through our camp, and maybe Bigfoot even saved one of us from being eaten or attacked that night. That's just me letting my imagination run with it, though. I don't even know if these two things were related whatsoever. They just both happened around the same time, so it's pretty cool to think about. One last thing I remember was one of the counselors, Shane, maybe Sean, said that he had a friend that was some kind of scientist and did something with wild animals, but I don't know in what capacity or anything more, and he was going to take the hair we had found over to him and have him look at it. The next week, Shane came back, 8 days on, 6 days off, schedule for counselors. All he said was that he gave it to his friend, and his friend stated he had never seen anything like it before and would get back to him. Nothing more, nothing less. I never asked anything on a follow-up. Beyond that, and none of it ever entered my brain again until I found my journal and read through it, coming across this entry. And here is that original journal entry. Forgive me for possibly messing some of the words up. It's in their penmanship. June 12th, 2004, Journal 35, Day 36. Today we woke up really early and had to divide up all of Robbie's things amongst the group. After taking some of his group food, I made my pack and then added his Weggy and little tarp also. We then hiked all the way to the closest water source, which was not far away, but because the pack was excruciating, the hike felt really long. Before we left, we had a coyote transition for the new kid named William. He has a cool accent, but I don't know anything about him because he haven't had an intro group yet. There were also these crazy Bigfoot prints going through camp, and hair was found high up in the tree about shoulder height. Once we got to the water source, we had breakfast and sat around for a really long time. I got to talk to Ryan for a little while today. He's a pretty cool kid. I love you, Jamie. Today's second experience. I'd never heard of crawlers until just recently. My friends and I used to camp a lot in El Dorado National Forest, and we had a spot along Spago Springs where we used to camp a lot. One weekend, we decided to go there for a 3-day foraging camp. We brought in MREs in case we couldn't find anything, some guns, some supplies to set up shelter, but that's about it. First night was chill. We cooked a bunch of crawdads and a squirrel my buddy shot, drank a few beers we had brought, and slept fine. Next day, something felt off to me. One of my friends who was with me and I had some really creepy experiences in this part of the forest in the past. And it felt a bit like those. The forest was dead silent, and you felt like something was watching you. I grew up in the woods, so I know the signs of a predator, but this felt different than a bear or a mountain lion. When night fell, my friends went 200 yards or so up to the stream to do some stuff. I was alone at camp. The feeling got even stronger, so I built up the fire nice and big and grabbed a gun. I kept hearing faint noises or voices from the woods in the opposite direction of where my friends went. They were low, indistinct sounds, but they were creeping me out majorly. And my buddies had taken the only 2 flashlights, poor planning in hindsight. As we peered into the darkness, I caught a glimpse of something moving 50 yards or so into the trees. I snapped the rifle to my shoulder to get a scope on it. It was pretty dark, and the only light was from the fire, but I could see an outline of what I was aiming at. It looked human, but it was on all fours, and its arms seemed a lot longer than they should. It stood a bit like an ape, but very low to the ground. I only saw it for a second before it loped off deeper into the woods. After I lost track of it, I'd hear light rustling in different directions around the camp. Leaves scuffling, the occasional twig breaking, always away from where my friends went. In a 180 degree on the other side of camp from their departure, I got the sense that whatever it was stalking me. I kept the fire high and was staying sharp looking into the woods. But I didn't see it again. My buddies came back about 10 minutes later to find me, paranoid wreck, glassing the tree line with the scope. I told them what had happened, and they got quiet, then told me. The reason they came back when they did is they started hearing the same crap I did over where they were, and it spooked them. We spent the second night of our trip with a big-ass fire and 3 lookouts. Nobody slept that night. In the morning, we broke camp as quick as we could and hightailed it out of there. We never camped in that spot again. Today's third experience. I live in central northern Massachusetts in the middle of the woods, but not too far from the center of town, maybe about a couple of miles. Anyway, a while back my family and I had become convinced that our house was haunted, but I wasn't really bothered by it. Whatever it is isn't too much of a nuisance and hasn't done anything to harm us, so we don't really mind. It has mostly just been apparitions, things turning on their own, and our pets getting spooked by nothing. That was until the more physical things started to happen, and I'm not sure if they are somehow connected to the peaceful presence in our house. Anyway, I was up late at around 3 in the morning watching YouTube. It was warm out, so I had my window open along with my curtain. Suddenly I heard what sounded like a grown man angrily scream right in my yard. My heart literally dropped. I was frozen with fear. Like I said before, we're in the middle of the woods, and there are only a couple of houses around us. No one would be screaming in our yard at 3 in the morning. I lied there for a few minutes listening for anything else, and I even rewinded the video I was watching to make sure what I heard was not from the video. Finally, I got the courage to get up, close my window, and woke my mom up, who I still live with, and she went around the house with me, turning on all the outside lights to see if there was anyone in our yard. There was nothing. I keep thinking about how, if I hadn't lied there paralyzed in fear, maybe I would have been able to see who or whatever it was. The next night, I slept with my window open again. Stupid, I know, and I had the most vivid dream I had ever had. In it, I was watching myself sleep, but outside the window staring in at me was an extremely pale face. It looked almost human, but not quite. I ended up jolting awake, completely terrified, and slamming my window shut and closing the shade. But I just kept having the dream over and over again for the next few days. Over the next few weeks, I kept hearing weird noises in the woods in broad daylight as well as late at night. It sounded like someone was hitting branches with a stick. Even my dog heard it and was running around the yard barking up a storm in an attempt to defend the house. Fast forward, my brother was home alone at 9 at night. He had let our dog outside, but when he got out onto the indoor porch, he saw something in the yard. The only light in the backyard was coming from the light inside the house. It illuminated a tall humanoid figure, maybe 7 feet tall, in our yard, standing about 15 feet away from the house, right in front of our fire pit. It had no clothes on, was extremely skinny, and apparently was so pale that it appeared to glow in the light. Thankfully, he didn't let our dog out and went inside, locking the doors and shutting the windows and waiting for my mom to get home. I know that he could just be lying, but when our mom got home, he was absolutely terrified and basically just hid in the living room until she got there. I've known him his whole life, and he has never lied about something like this, and is, in fact, a horrible liar, so I'm confident he's telling the truth. Anyway, I was currently sitting on the indoor porch at around 8 p.m. typing this out, waiting to see if I could spot or at least hear something. I'm honestly debating on whether or not I should sleep out here. I did a little reading beforehand on some creatures and came across crawlers. When my brother described it, he said it was standing completely upright. He didn't see it walk or crawl in any way. Maybe it might be a crawler, I don't know. I don't know if we're in danger or not. And it is possible that it is somehow connected to the paranormal stuff that has been happening in our home. Today's fourth experience. So I was on vacation in Minnesota at a place called Dead Lake. It's in Otter Tail County. It was July of 2020. The time was about 1 or 2 in the morning. I had went outside to sit by the campfire and smoke my blunt. But my stepdad followed me outside and sat down with me. I recently turned 18. He smokes weed, but I don't know if he'd be cool with me doing it. He had a blunt as well, so plot twist there. We're smoking and chopping it up. I had some music playing. That's why I can't tell you what the initial sound was, but it was loud enough to make me turn off the music and say, "What was that?" It came from the reeds on the other side of the beach, maybe 30 feet away. My stepdad heard it as well, and we sat there quietly for 15 minutes waiting to hear something else. I broke the silence, saying I had not heard a loon call out all night. Literally 5 seconds after that, we heard the two-tone call of a loon out on the lake. That was normal. What wasn't was the call we heard after. It sounded like an ape mimicking a loon, but you could tell it came from far away because it was so loud. The loon called out one more time. Then, from even further away, we heard a whoop. It sounded like if a deep-voiced man was mimicking a Bigfoot, but it was from so far away it couldn't possibly be a human. I was pretty shook up after that, and I wanted to go inside because my stepdad, who is a very, very practical, said I am 90% sure that was Bigfoot. Then he told me he had a theory on what it was doing. He told me a few years back he was sitting with my mom by the reeds where we had heard the first call, and he had heard what sounded like a Bigfoot mimicking a coyote. Then 3 coyotes howled, and it stopped. Now anyone who has been in the woods like that knows why that's unusual. Every coyote in the area would have gone off, and there was definitely more than 3. He said that this creature was hunting. I said, "How do you know?" Then he said, "You don't hear the loon anymore, do you?" And like clockwork, from behind me in the trees, I heard something mimic a coyote howl. Right after my stepdad told me about this. Then 3 coyotes went off, and it stopped. I went inside after that. I'm positive I heard of Sasquatch. I have never heard anything like it. I didn't see it, but it's just a feeling I had, like I wasn't at the top of the food chain in the area. And tonight's final experience. So far, I've only told a few people close to me about this experience. It took place in southeastern Wisconsin, roughly 7 years ago. I went with a girl I was seeing to a nature center about 20 minutes from my house. I was 19 at the time. She was 1 year younger. It was about 10 p.m. when we arrived. We had brought a blanket with us and made our way up the main hill that overlooks the city of Waukesha from a very long distance. Up on this hill, through some pretty heavy woods, there is an area right at the top of the hill that has a wooden bench with no backrest. It was just us two, as we were the only car in the parking area. I've been on the other side down the steep hill once before, so I had a good idea on where we were going to lay the blanket out. We set up for about 20 to 25 yards down the hill, away from the top bench area. Mind you, aside from that old wooden bench, there is nothing but woods, tall grass fields. We lied there for 45 minutes, just looking up at the sky. I knew from being here in the past that if somebody else comes and they are at the top of the hill, it's impossible to see them from the area we were at, but you can easily hear them. At around the 45-minute mark, something caught my attention. It sounded like someone was at the top of the hill, rustling the leaves and dirt around. I didn't want to startle her, but she realized I was paying attention to whoever or whatever was up at the hill. The moon was fairly bright that night, so I had a decent view toward the top, but as I said, it's almost impossible to see anything up there. And if you do, it's only the top of whatever's head. At this moment, I start hearing an almost huffing, puffing, light growling noise. I thought it was pretty odd, and crouched down a bit, still my eyes locked up on top. I assured her through whispers to stay down and stay still. We really didn't feel like getting noticed by anyone up there. Here's where it takes a very odd turn. As I'm hearing these noises, seeing nothing at the top, a figure appears smack dab on the exact point of where the bench is located. The noises continue. So here I am, mind racing, trying to keep calm and make sense of what the hell is going on. I decide it's just some guy standing on the bench, acting like a weirdo. But the more I'm watching, this was clearly not a person. I was able to make out a very thick, dark figure from where the belly button would be on a human all the way up. Actually, I'd say 5 inches from where the belly button area would be. I watched on as this figure's head went side to side like a madman, huffing and puffing, basically completely spazzing out. The head of the creature was much larger than any man I had ever seen. It was evident through the moonlight I had that this thing was one solid dark color. I'm in complete disbelief, still fighting to play it cool, as the girl I'm with is behind me, trying to stay as flat as possible and facing the opposite direction. This creature stayed in one spot, never pacing, yet head snapping side to side, almost studying the hill and land around it. I assumed this thing must be standing atop of the bench and making it appear very tall. Nope, dead wrong. For whatever reason, this creature snaps its head to the right one last time and takes off in an acceleration that scared the living crap out of me. It didn't jump off of the bench. I witnessed this thing run on an angle down the side of the hill for about 40 yards upright at the speed that no human is capable of. I sat there, jaw dropped, as it vanished into the woods. I instantly turned around, snatched the blanket while pulling her up, and said, "We need to go now." I didn't even care that this thing could possibly be lurking in the woods. I didn't want to even chance staying on this hill for another second. We're finally about 100 yards from my car. Nope, I did not run into this thing, but the both of us heard the most horrifying screech yelp back made 100 to 200 yards. That lasted 10 to 15 seconds, a noise I can say I've never even come close to hearing before. She was beyond terrified, grabbed me as we stood completely still. The final 100 yards we jogged, trying to make as little noise as possible. It's important to me to get every detail that I can to you and get an understanding of the situation. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else, but I will have to add it if I do. This thing had to be over 8 feet tall plus. At least 300 pounds, no clothes, one solid color. Made animal type, pissed off I'd say sounds, ran on 2 legs. The part to this day that freaks me out the most is the speed at which this creature ran. It was not normal. Last thing I'll add is this area is located about 30 minutes from Bray Road, where the Beast of Bray Road sightings happened. I haven't been back to that area since that night. Close, but I'm never going back to the woods. Another reason the running part freaked me out the most was because for the speed at which this creature was running, it stayed almost abnormally upright. As in, say you're watching a track and field event. The runner's arms swing forward and backwards constantly as they run, their shoulders cut inwards with each swing of the arm. This thing did not display a normal type of run. It almost seemed to use its legs entirely while keeping its arms quite tight to itself, with its elbow bent to form an L. There was some arm movement, but nowhere near that what humans would do when they run. And for as fast as it was going, I had this feeling that it was capable of going even faster. As soon as it started to run, the huffing, puffing, growling noises stopped, or I just was not able to hear them. Some 3 to 4 years after this all took place, my buddy started dating a girl that went to high school with us. I never talked to her in school. One night, on our way to a baseball game, she proceeded to tell us a story of a sighting her and her brother had years before on the glacial Drumlin bike trail. I never told her about what I had seen yet. I asked her when we got to the game if she could draw what she saw. So she took her pen out of her purse. I gave her a piece of paper from my glove compartment. I was absolutely shocked because she basically drew the same exact thing I witnessed. When I say exact, I mean scary exact. Through getting to know her, her mother told us on a later occasion about how scared she and her brother were that day when they got back home. The part that also freaked her out is that when the creature saw them, it took a massive jump and took off at a very high speed into the woods. The trail was located 20 minutes away from the nature center where my sighting took place. To this day, neither of us had seen anything like it, besides a time where I believed to have seen a wolf cross a road on all fours, as possible to see a wolf down here, but rare. I know exactly where this experience took place. I had a subscriber who was not an excavator. He was a surveyor. Huh. And he surveyed land for like an asphalt creation facility. What they did was I believe they had taken shingles from old homes and created like asphalt for roads or something out of it. Well, needless to say, he was down at this area and monitoring the water and stuff to make sure there was no poisonous chemicals or whatever leaching into the ground. And he had seen a Dogman. And this location from there is about 15 to 20 minutes, all within this general area of where the Beast of the Bray Road has been seen. And, well, for me, the Beast of Bray Road is like the LBL experience. You know, it's so old that, and so many people have like seen things in that area that it has to be true. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed this night ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.